Using research from IVF technology, experts believe they will one day be able to solve the biggest problem of infertility, growing new eggs and sperm from stem cells for people who can no longer produce them.
She was never meant to exist. At least that is what many experts said at the time. They called her birth impossible, unnatural, and even risky.
The doctors hope that someday soon she'll be just one of many so-called test tube babies.
In 1978, a baby girl was born through a new medical process that shocked the whole world and started strong debates in many countries. She became known as the world's first test tube baby, a sign that science had crossed a major limit. But many years later, her life did not go the way people expected. So what does she really look like now? And where is she today? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. What the first world's test tube baby looks like today. Today, Louise Joy Brown lives a quiet life in England. She has a husband, children, and an ordinary job. If someone passed her on the street, they would never guess that she changed the world before she could even speak her first word. But when Louise was born, everything was different. Her birth was not just another birth. It was one of the most important moments in medical history. Doctors, scientists, reporters, and government officials were all watching. People across the world waited for news. Some believed she would prove a miracle was possible. Others believed she should never have been born at all. To understand why her birth mattered so much, it is important to go back many years before she arrived. Her mother, Leslie Brown, wanted nothing more than to have a child. She and her husband, John Brown, lived a simple life in England. They were not rich. They were not famous. They were an ordinary working couple who dreamed about becoming parents. At first, they believed it would happen naturally. Like many young couples, they expected that one day they would welcome a baby into their home. But the months passed. Then the years passed. Still, no child came. Each passing year became harder than the one before it. Friends became parents. Family members announced pregnancies. Babies were born all around them. Every happy announcement reminded Leslie of what she did not have. She tried to stay hopeful. She believed that maybe next month would be different. Then the next month became another year. Soon, 9 long years had passed. Finally, doctors found the reason. Leslie's fallopian tubes were blocked. Because of this, her eggs could not travel through her body the way they were supposed to. The egg and sperm could never meet naturally. At that time, no treatment could solve the problem. The message from doctors was painful and simple. She would probably never have a child of her own. For many people, that would have been the end of the story. But at the same time, 2 men were working on an idea that most people thought was impossible. One was a doctor named Patrick Steptoe. The other was a scientist named Robert Edwards. They believed there might be another way for a baby to begin life. Their idea sounded shocking during the 70s. What if an egg and sperm could be joined together outside the human body? What if the first stages of life could begin in a laboratory? And what if that tiny embryo could then be placed inside a mother's womb and continue growing normally? Today, this process is known as IVF. Millions of people have heard of it. But back then, almost nobody believed it could work. Many people thought the idea was dangerous. Others believed it was wrong. Some even called it a sin. The criticism was strong. Newspapers questioned the work. Religious leaders spoke against it. Many scientists doubted it would ever succeed. Still, Steptoe and Edwards refused to stop. Year after year, they continued trying. They worked with couples who were desperate to have children. They created embryos and carefully transferred them into the mothers. Each time, they hoped for success. Each time, they failed. One failure became 10. 10 became 20. 20 became 40. Eventually, 64 attempts ended without a successful birth. Many people believed the project should be abandoned. The failures seemed to prove that nature could not be changed. But Steptoe and Edwards saw things differently. They believed every failure was teaching them something. They believed success might still be waiting ahead. Then Leslie and John Brown entered the story. The doctors explained everything to them. They explained the risks. They explained that no baby had ever been born this way before. They explained that the whole world might be watching. The Browns understood. Even so, they agreed. Their desire to have a child was stronger than their fear. Doctors collected one of Leslie's eggs. In a laboratory, the egg was joined with John's sperm. Soon, the egg began to divide and grow. A tiny embryo had formed. Carefully and gently, the doctors placed it inside Leslie's womb. Then, everyone waited. Days passed. Weeks passed. And for the first time in history, something incredible happened. The embryo stayed in place. The pregnancy continued. Leslie Brown was expecting a baby. The impossible had finally become possible. But the biggest test was still ahead. No one knew what would happen when the child was finally born. But the pregnancy was only the beginning. As the world watched and waited, one question remained. When the baby was finally born, would she be healthy? Let's delve deeper. The birth that changed millions of lives. As Leslie Brown's pregnancy continued, news began to spread across Britain and then across the world. What had started as a private medical treatment was now becoming one of the biggest stories anyone had ever seen. Reporters wanted answers. Newspapers wanted photographs. Television stations wanted interviews. Everyone wanted to know about the baby growing inside Leslie Brown. Many people were excited. They believed they were watching a great moment in science. They believed this child could open a door for families who had spent years suffering because they could not have children. But not everyone felt that way. Many people were still afraid. The closer the birth came, the greater the attention became. Behind all the headlines and public debate, there was one simple question that nobody could answer. Would the baby be healthy? That question stayed in everyone's mind. Doctors understood that this birth would be watched more closely than almost any other birth in modern history. Every decision mattered. Every detail mattered. Nothing could be left to chance. To make the delivery as safe as possible, doctors decided that the baby would be born by cesarean section. Then the historic day arrived. On the night of July 25, 1978, inside Oldham General Hospital, a team of doctors and nurses prepared for a moment that had never happened before. The atmosphere inside the hospital was tense. Everyone understood the importance of what was about to take place. The operation began. Then it happened. A baby girl entered the world. Almost immediately, she cried. For the people in that room, that cry meant everything. It was the sound they had hoped to hear. It was the sound that proved the baby was alive. It was the sound that changed medical history forever. Doctors quickly examined her. She had 10 fingers. She had 10 toes. Her heart was strong. Her lungs were working. She looked exactly like any other healthy newborn baby. The fears that had followed the pregnancy for months suddenly began to disappear. The baby was healthy. The baby was normal. The baby was real. Her name was Louise Joy Brown. Soon, the news traveled around the world. She went to school. She played with other children. She made friends. She laughed, learned, and grew just like any other child. Her parents tried hard to give her a normal childhood despite all the attention surrounding her. They wanted people to see Louise as a little girl, not as an experiment. Thankfully, many people in her community did exactly that. Years passed. The child who had once been at the center of a worldwide debate became a young woman. Then she continued proving the critics wrong. In 2004, Louise married Wesley Mullender. It was a normal wedding, filled with family, friends, and happiness. She was no longer simply the world's first IVF baby. She was a wife building her own future. 2 years later, another important moment arrived. Louise became a mother. Her first son, Cameron, was conceived naturally. No IVF treatment was needed. Later, she welcomed a second son named Aiden. Again, the pregnancy happened naturally. The doubts that had followed IVF for decades continued to fade. Her younger sister, Natalie, also helped answer many questions. Natalie, who had also been born through IVF, became the first IVF-born woman known to naturally conceive and give birth to a child. This provided even more proof that IVF did not prevent normal fertility. Meanwhile, IVF treatment continued to spread across the world. What had once been called impossible slowly became common. Clinics have opened in many countries. Doctors improved the process. Success rates increased. More and more families were able to experience the joy of becoming parents. The work that Patrick Steptoe and Robert Edwards had begun was changing millions of lives. Eventually, Robert Edwards received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. The award recognized the importance of the breakthrough that had once been criticized by so many people. It was a powerful moment. Today, Louise Brown continues to share her story with people around the world. With reporters following her every move and millions of people watching, would Louise Brown grow up like any other child, or would the world forever treat her as an experiment? Let's find out. The baby everyone wanted to see. When Louise Brown was born, the world seemed to stop and look in her direction. Most babies come into the world surrounded only by their family, a few doctors, and perhaps some close friends waiting for good news. Louise's birth was very different. Long before she opened her eyes for the first time, people across different countries were already talking about her. The attention became so great that it was difficult for her parents to enjoy those first precious days with their newborn daughter. Louise was born in Oldham, England. Her parents lived in Bristol, hundreds of miles away. Normally, after a baby is born, parents take their child home as soon as doctors say it is safe. But things were not normal for the Brown family. There were simply too many people trying to get close to the story. Even after leaving the hospital, the attention continued. People discovered where the family lived. News crews appeared near their home. Strangers wanted to know more. Some wanted photographs. Some wanted interviews. Some simply wanted to see the child everyone was talking about. Because of all this, Louise did not immediately return home. By the time she finally arrived back in Bristol, she was already 12 days old. For her parents, those first days were not peaceful. Instead of enjoying complete privacy with their new daughter, they found themselves at the center of a worldwide story. What made things even more interesting was that many people did not really understand what IVF was. Today, information is easy to find. A person can search online and learn about almost anything within minutes. Back then, things were different. Most people had never heard of IVF. Many had no idea how it worked. As a result, strange ideas began to spread. One day, after returning home, Louise's mother decided to take her out in a pram. It was something every mother wants to do. She wanted to enjoy a simple outing with her baby. While visiting a local bakery, people recognized them. Word quickly spread that the famous baby was there. People gathered around the pram. They politely asked if they could have a look. Louise's mother agreed. She lowered the hood of the pram so they could see her daughter. The reaction was immediate. One woman commented that the baby looked completely normal. To Louise's mother, the reaction was almost funny. She wondered what people had expected to see. After all, Louise was just a baby. She looked exactly like thousands of other babies born that same year. Little by little, Louise began changing those opinions without even realizing it. Simply by being healthy, she was becoming proof that IVF could create healthy children. But while the public was beginning to accept her, doctors still wanted answers. And because she was the first IVF baby, they planned to examine her more carefully than perhaps any baby before her. The little girl who had already become the center of worldwide attention was about to face another challenge. Doctors wanted to make sure that every fear, every question, and every doubt surrounding her birth could finally be answered. Would the world's first IVF child continue to grow normally? Or would doctors eventually discover the problems that critics had been warning about all along? Let's learn more. Growing up as the world's most famous baby. For years before her birth, critics had warned that a baby conceived through IVF might not be healthy. Because of these fears, doctors decided to examine Louise more carefully than any ordinary newborn. In the days after her birth, she went through an extraordinary number of medical tests. Doctors checked every part of her health. They wanted answers. They wanted proof. More than 100 tests were reportedly carried out. Every result seemed to tell the same story. Louise was healthy. Doctors searched for problems but could not find any. Her body was functioning normally. Her development appeared normal. Everything they examined suggested that she was just like any other baby. One unusual test remained in her family's memory for many years. Doctors even took her fingerprints shortly after she was born. When her mother finally got the chance to properly see her daughter, she noticed black ink on Louise's tiny fingertips. She naturally wanted to know why. The explanation was simple. Doctors had taken fingerprints as part of their extensive examinations. Nothing was being left to chance. The medical team wanted detailed records of everything connected to the child who had made history. Yet, despite all the testing, nothing alarming was discovered. No hidden problems appeared. No unusual conditions were found. No evidence supported the fears that many people had expressed before her birth. As the weeks turned into months, and the months turned into years, Louise continued proving those fears wrong. Perhaps the most important thing about her childhood was how ordinary it became. After the tests performed when she was a newborn, she did not spend her life moving from hospital to hospital. She did not need special treatment. She did not live under constant medical supervision. Instead, she grew up like other children. Every healthy year that passed gave people more confidence in the treatment. As Louise grew older, her parents knew they could not keep her story a secret forever. Sooner or later, she would hear people talking about her birth. She would hear the words IVF and test tube baby. She would need to understand why people recognized her. Before she started school, her parents decided to explain things. When Louise was 4 years old, they sat her down and showed her a video recording of her own birth. For many children, 4 years old is an age filled with cartoons, toys, and simple games. Yet Louise was learning that she had entered the world in a way no other child ever had before her. Then, during her teenage years, everything finally made sense. When she attended sexual education classes at school and learned more about human reproduction, she suddenly understood why her birth had become world news. For the first time, she fully understood the journey her parents had taken and the significance of the treatment that had made her life possible. School brought another challenge. Many of Louise's classmates knew who she was. They knew she had been called the world's first test tube baby. The nickname created confusion. Louise often found herself explaining this misunderstanding. Rather than becoming upset, she often used these moments to teach people about IVF. Fortunately, her school experience remained largely positive. Because she attended school with many of the same children year after year, over time, Louise's story became much bigger than her own life. As IVF spread across the world, more and more children were born through the treatment. What once seemed impossible slowly became common. Yet none of those stories would have existed without the little girl who came first. The baby that people crowded around to see. The child who went through more than 100 tests. The schoolgirl who answered endless questions about test tubes. The young woman who proved the critics wrong simply by living an ordinary life. Today, millions of people exist because IVF became a reality. If science could help create life where nature had failed, how far would that science eventually go? And what new possibilities and challenges would it bring to the future of human reproduction? Stay tuned for more. The New Age of IVF, Hope, Science, and Difficult Questions. After the first successful IVF birth, the world of fertility treatment began to change faster than anyone had imagined. What started as a way to help couples who could not have children slowly grew into something much bigger. Scientists kept learning. Doctors kept improving their methods. Year after year, discoveries opened doors that had never existed before. What once seemed impossible was now becoming normal, and people began asking not only what science could do, but also how far science should go. In the early years, the goal of IVF was simple. Doctors wanted to help a man and woman have a baby when nature had made it difficult or impossible. For many families, that alone felt like a miracle. But as technology improved, doctors discovered they could learn more about an embryo before it was placed inside the mother's womb. This was something that earlier generations could never have imagined. Scientists developed ways to study embryos while they were still in the laboratory. They could examine tiny cells and look for signs of certain diseases or medical problems. This gave doctors information they never had before. Instead of simply hoping for the best, they could now understand more about an embryo before a pregnancy even started. For many families, this brought a new sense of hope. Some parents carry serious genetic diseases that can be passed from one generation to the next. These diseases can cause suffering for children and heartbreak for families. The ability to check embryos before implantation gave some parents a chance to reduce those risks. It offered hope that future children might avoid conditions that had affected previous generations. Many people welcomed these developments. They saw them as another step forward in medicine. Just as doctors use vaccines to prevent disease and surgeries to save lives, They believed these new IVF techniques could help families have healthier children. To them, it was simply another way that science was helping people. As these technologies improved, doctors became able to identify many different genetic conditions. They could sometimes detect problems linked to chromosomes or inherited illnesses. This allowed parents and doctors to make informed decisions before pregnancy began. Families who had spent years worrying about passing on serious conditions suddenly had options they never had before. Yet every new scientific advance also brought new questions. Some people began wondering where the line should be drawn. If doctors could check embryos for disease, what else might they eventually be able to do? Could future technology allow parents to choose certain traits for their children? Could they select things such as eye color, height, intelligence, or athletic ability? At first, these ideas sounded like science fiction. They seemed like stories from movies rather than real life. But because science was advancing so quickly, many experts believed these questions needed serious discussion. Even if the technology was not fully available, people wanted to think carefully about what might happen in the future. This created a debate that continues today. On one side were people who believed science should be used to reduce suffering whenever possible. They argued that if technology could prevent disease, improve health, and help families, then society should welcome those advances. They believed medical progress had always improved human life, and that reproductive medicine should be no different. On the other side were people who worried about the possible consequences. They feared that if parents could begin selecting certain characteristics, society might slowly move toward designing children rather than simply helping them. They worried that people might eventually value some traits more than others, creating new forms of pressure and inequality. Another concern involved money. Many experts pointed out that advanced reproductive technology can be expensive. Not every family can afford costly medical treatments. If future technologies become available only to wealthy people, some fear that social divisions could grow even larger. Families with greater financial resources might gain access to options that others simply cannot afford. These concerns led to discussions among doctors, scientists, lawmakers, and ethicists around the world. Most agreed that scientific progress should continue. At the same time, many believed that careful rules and oversight would be necessary to make sure the technology is used responsibly. While these debates continued, IVF itself became far more accepted by the public. Slowly, IVF became part of everyday life. Before Louise Brown could become the baby that changed history forever, who were the forgotten scientists and researchers who spent decades battling failure, criticism, and impossible odds to make IVF a reality? Let's take a closer look. The long search for a way to create life outside the womb. Long before the world heard about Louise Brown, many scientists spent decades trying to understand how human life begins. Their work was difficult, slow, and often filled with failure. Most people today know about IVF because it has helped millions of families have children. But before IVF became successful, there were many men and women who dedicated their lives to solving one of medicine's biggest mysteries. One of the earliest people to believe in the future of IVF was a fertility specialist named John Rock. He saw many women who desperately wanted children but could not become pregnant. He believed science might one day provide answers where nature seemed to have closed the door. To help with this research, he hired a talented researcher named Miriam Menken in 1938. Miriam Menken spent years working in laboratories trying to fertilize a human egg outside the body. The work was exhausting. Hundreds of women agreed to donate eggs for research. Week after week, Menken repeated the same process. Eggs were collected. Sperm was added. Then everyone waited to see if fertilization would happen. Most of the time, nothing happened. The experiments failed again and again. Years passed with little success. The disappointment became part of everyday life. Yet Menken continued. She believed that every failure taught scientists something new. She kept working even when there seemed to be no reward for her efforts. Then, in February 1944, everything changed. After spending several sleepless nights caring for her young child, Menken arrived at the laboratory exhausted. During one experiment, she accidentally left the sperm and egg together longer than usual. It was a small change, but it produced a historic result. When she looked through her microscope, Miriam Menken saw something no human being had ever seen before. A human egg had been successfully fertilized outside the body and had begun dividing into cells. The sight left her amazed. Years of failure had finally produced a breakthrough. News of the discovery spread quickly. Newspapers became fascinated by the possibility that babies might someday be created through laboratory techniques. The phrase test tube baby soon entered public discussion. Women struggling with infertility wrote letters asking when the new technology would be available. For many families, this discovery offered hope where there had previously been none. Unfortunately, the momentum did not last. Soon after the breakthrough, Miriam Menken left the project to move with her husband to another state. Without her, the research slowed dramatically. John Rock eventually stopped the experiments, and progress in IVF entered a period of uncertainty. After Miriam Menken's historic breakthrough and the sudden slowdown in IVF research, who would pick up the dream, carry it forward, and move the world one step closer to creating the first IVF baby? Let's find out. The race to create the first IVF baby. Years later, another scientist became one of the strongest supporters of IVF research. His name was Landrum Shettles. He believed that fertilization outside the body represented the future of reproductive medicine. While many people doubted the idea, Shettles remained determined to prove it could work. Those who knew him often described him as completely devoted to his work. He spent countless hours inside hospitals and laboratories studying human eggs. Sometimes he stayed at the hospital so long that he slept there rather than returning home. His colleagues frequently saw him working late at night or early in the morning. He seemed driven by a single goal: understanding human reproduction well enough to make IVF a reality. In 1955, Landrum Shettles reported that he had managed to fertilize a human egg and keep it alive for several days. Although this was not yet enough to create a pregnancy, it represented another important step forward. Later, in 1960, he published detailed photographs of human eggs during their early stages of development. Scientists around the world considered these images remarkable because very few researchers had ever seen human eggs in such detail. Throughout the 60s, Shettles continued pushing forward. He wanted to create embryos that could survive long enough to be transferred into a woman's womb. The challenge remained enormous, but he refused to give up. Then another important chapter began. In 1973, a woman named Doris Delzio became part of a bold attempt to make IVF history. Doctors removed an egg from her ovary with the hope that she might become the first woman to conceive through IVF. Her husband, John Delzio, played a crucial role in the process. He carried the egg across New York City and later provided the sperm sample needed for the experiment. Waiting for him was Landrum Shettles, who believed the moment could change medicine forever. Together, Doris Delzio, John Delzio, and Landrum Shettles became part of one of the most ambitious IVF attempts ever undertaken in the United States. At the same time, two researchers in Britain were making rapid progress of their own. Physiologist Robert Edwards and gynecologist Patrick Steptoe were developing new methods that moved IVF closer than ever to success. Their breakthroughs suggested that the dream scientists had chased for decades might finally become reality. By the end of the 60s and early 70s, the race to create the world's first IVF baby had become one of the most important scientific challenges in modern medicine. Scientists, doctors, and hopeful families all understood that history was approaching. After decades of research, sacrifice, and failure, the world was moving closer to a moment that would change millions of lives forever. What do you think about IVF procedures? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the story of Louise Brown and the birth of IVF. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Click on the next video to continue exploring more fascinating stories. See you in the next one.